Have you ever walked into a place and felt instantly that you were not welcome? That the air itself pressed against your skin heavy, like a hand on your chest? That's what it's like inside the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. A place so massive it looms like a castle from another world. Its gray stone walls stretch for nearly a quarter of a mile, towering over the town like a monument to madness. Some people call it the most haunted building in America. Others whisper that it's cursed. I didn't believe in curses not until I stepped inside. The first time I visited, I wasn't there for ghosts. I was there for history. I thought it would make a good story for the magazine I wrote for something about the rise and fall of mental institutions in America. But the moment I walked through those iron gates, something changed. The air felt wrong. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with something I couldn't see, but it was there, moving in the shadows, waiting. The asylum was built in the mid-1800s. Back then, they said it was a place of healing, where people suffering from mental illness could recover. But almost immediately, it turned into something else. The building, meant for 250 patients, held over 2,000 at its peak. Hallways swelled with the sound of screaming. Men and women were locked in cages, chained to walls, forgotten. Doctors performed lobotomies with ice picks, hammering them through eye sockets. Some patients wandered the halls for decades, naked, filthy, reduced to little more than animals. Others simply vanished, their bodies never accounted for. As I walked through the main corridor that first day, my guide's flashlight beam fell across faded paint peeling off the walls. A rusted wheelchair sat abandoned in the corner, its wheels squeaking faintly as if touched by a breeze. But there was no breeze. The air inside was still stifling, as though the asylum had swallowed it whole. "This is the Civil War wing," the guide whispered. "Some of the first patients were soldiers. They said they saw things here that no one else could see." I remember feeling a chill. Not because of his words, but because I realized we weren't alone. I can't explain it, but it was like someone was standing right behind me. I turned quickly. The hallway was empty. Still, I could swear I heard breathing. Slow, ragged, right at my ear. That was the moment I should have left. But I didn't. I wanted to see more. I told myself it was just my imagination, that old buildings make strange noises. But deep down, a part of me already knew I had stepped into something I couldn't walk away from. We moved deeper into the asylum. The guide talked about how patients were often subjected to hydrotherapy, locked into bathtubs filled with ice water for hours. He told us about the isolation cells where people screamed until their throats bled. But the worst, he said, was Ward F, the violent ward. That's where the truly dangerous patients were kept. Murderers, rapists, men who'd lost their minds completely. When we reached Ward F, the door creaked open like it hadn't been touched in years. The corridor was narrow, lined with rusted bars. The smell hit me immediately, thick, metallic, almost like blood. My stomach churned. The flashlight beam darted across the floor, and that's when I saw it. Scratches. Long, deep gouges carved into the stone walls. Words, names, pleas for help. "Get out, no more, kill me." The handwriting was frantic, desperate. I felt a tug on my jacket. I spun around, heart hammering. No one was there. The guide had already walked ahead, his light fading into the darkness. But something had touched me. I know it. I felt the cold grip of fingers. "Come on," the guide called. "This way." I forced myself forward, every step heavier than the last. My chest was tight, my vision blurred, and then I heard it, a whisper, clear as day, right beside me. They never left. I froze. My skin went cold, my breath shallow. "What did you say?" I asked the guide. He stopped and turned, confused. I didn't say anything, but I knew what I heard. A voice that didn't belong to him. A voice that didn't belong to anyone alive. The rest of the tour was a blur. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision. Doors creaked open and shut on their own. At one point, I thought I saw someone watching me from the end of the hall. A tall figure in a hospital gown, head cocked unnaturally to the side, but when I blinked, it was gone. By the time we stepped outside, the night air felt like freedom. My heart was still racing. I told myself it was just nerves, just the atmosphere playing tricks on me. But that night, when I lay in bed at my hotel, I woke to the sound of screaming. Not distant, not muffled screaming right there in the room. I bolted upright, sweat pouring down my face. The room was empty, silent, but when I looked in the mirror across from the bed, my blood ran cold. Behind me, in the reflection, someone was standing in the shadows. I couldn't move. I stared at the mirror, my throat tight, my body frozen. The reflection was wrong behind me in the corner of the room. A figure stood just at the edge of the shadows, tall, thin, its head tilted in the same broken angle I'd seen in the asylum hallway. I whipped around, heart pounding, but the room was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, the figure was gone. I didn't sleep again that night. At dawn, I left the hotel and drove straight back to Weston. My plan had been simple: finish my article, get a few more notes, and leave this place behind forever. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Something had followed me out of that building. The asylum loomed in the morning fog, gray and silent, its windows like dark eyes watching me. The tour guide wasn't there this time. I told myself I'd just walk the grounds, maybe peek into the Civil War wing again. But as I crossed the courtyard, I saw the front doors were already open, just enough for me to slip inside. The silence inside was worse than daylight. The halls seemed endless, the peeling paint hanging like dead skin from the walls. I kept hearing faint footsteps echoing behind me, but whenever I turned, the hallway stretched empty. Still, I pushed forward, deeper into the asylum. In one of the rooms, I found old patient files scattered across the floor, the paper yellowed and brittle. I picked one up at random. A woman named Margaret, 32 years old. Diagnosis: hysteria. Treatment: repeated hydrotherapy, solitary confinement, eventual lobotomy. I felt sick reading the words, imagining her screams echoing through these same halls. The file ended abruptly with the word, deceased. No explanation. No burial record, nothing. As I crouched to pick up another file, the door behind me slammed shut with a thunderous crack. I jumped, dropping the papers. My pulse hammered in my ears. I rushed to the door, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. The room grew colder, so cold I could see my breath. And then I heard it. A woman sobbing. Soft at first, then louder, echoing around the room. "Hello," I called out, though my voice trembled. "Is someone there?" The sobbing stopped. Silence. Then, right beside my ear, a whisper. "They never let me leave." I stumbled back, slamming against the wall. My chest burned with panic. I grabbed the door handle again, twisting, yanking. Finally, it gave way, and I staggered into the hall. But the hallway wasn't empty. At the far end, a figure stood. A woman, her gown torn, her hair hanging in front of her face. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She just watched me. My instincts screamed to run, but my legs felt like lead. She lifted her head slowly, revealing eyes that were nothing but black hollows. And then she screamed. The sound was so piercing, so inhuman, that it rattled my bones. Lights flickered overhead. The hallway warped and stretched, as if the building itself was twisting around me. I turned and ran, not caring where I was going, just desperate to escape. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes? Hours? Every corridor looked the same. The asylum was a maze, its walls closing in, its doors leading nowhere. I found myself in a ward I hadn't seen before, small, windowless rooms with heavy iron doors. Inside one cell, I saw chains bolted to the walls. In another, a rotting mattress covered in stains. The smell was unbearable. That's when I heard it again, breathing, slow, wet, right behind me. I turned, and the figure was there, the same one from the mirror, from the hallway. The tall man in the hospital gown, his head bent unnaturally to the side, his face pale and featureless, as if it had been erased. I stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold of one of the cells. The door swung shut behind me with a deafening clang. Darkness swallowed me. I screamed, pounding on the iron door. My fists bled, but the door didn't move. And then fingers touched mine through the crack beneath the door, cold, then pulling. I yanked my hands away, trembling. The air filled with whispers, dozens of voices speaking at once. Some wept, some begged, some laughed with a hollow, manic edge. They swirled around me, suffocating, pressing against my skull until I thought it would crack, and then silence. Utter silence. The door creaked open on its own. I didn't question it, I ran. My legs carried me through the asylum, up staircases, down corridors, until finally I burst through the front doors into the gray daylight. I collapsed on the steps, gasping for air. My clothes clung to my skin with sweat, my hands still bleeding. I told myself I would never ever go back inside. Whatever lived in those walls wanted me there, wanted me trapped with them. But I had escaped. Or so I thought. That night, back at my apartment 2 states away, I woke again to the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy. Crossing the floor of my living room, my heart sank as I realized the truth. I hadn't escaped. I had brought it with me. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. Old houses make noises, I told myself. Pipes creak, floors shift. But the footsteps didn't stop. Night after night, they returned slow, deliberate, pacing the length of my apartment. Sometimes they stopped just outside my bedroom door, and I'd lie frozen under the covers, praying I wouldn't hear the knob turn. But the worst part wasn't the footsteps. It was the voices. They started faint, like distant murmurs seeping through the walls. I'd wake up to the sound of sobbing in the kitchen or laughter echoing from the bathroom. Once, I heard someone whisper my name from inside my closet. My own name, stretched out and broken, like it had been pulled through a dying throat. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. Every shadow became a threat, every reflection a trap. I tried to convince myself I was losing my mind, that maybe I'd read too many patient files, absorbed too many stories from the asylum, but then things began to move. I came home from work one evening to find every cabinet door in the kitchen hanging wide open. Another night, I woke to the sound of silverware clattering, only to find knives lined up perfectly across the counter, their blades pointing at me. One night, I found something worse. Scratched into the paint of my bedroom wall, just above my bed, were 3 words, "Never leave me." The handwriting was frantic, jagged. My chest tightened. It wasn't just following me, it was marking me, claiming me. I reached out for help, a priest, a paranormal investigator, even a psychiatrist. None of it worked. The priest sprinkled holy water, but the walls only groaned louder, and the voices mocked him until he fled. The investigator set up cameras, but they all went dark at exactly 3:15 a.m. The same moment, I felt cold hands grip my ankles under the sheets. And the psychiatrist? He listened, nodded, scribbled notes, and finally admitted me to a clinic for sleep deprivation and stress. But in the dead of night, even there, the footsteps came. Even there, I saw it, the figure. Always the same, tall, thin, head bent, face featureless. It never spoke, but its presence filled every corner of my life. It stood at the end of my bed. It watched from mirrors. Sometimes when I turned too quickly, I swore I saw it standing just inches from me, waiting. I knew what it wanted. It wanted me to return. For weeks I resisted. I fought it with every ounce of willpower I had. But the pull grew stronger. My dreams were filled with the asylum's hall's endless, rotting corridors stretching into infinity. Every dream ended the same way. Me standing before the iron gates and the voice whispering, "Come home." One night, I finally gave in. I don't remember driving. I don't remember packing. All I know is that I woke up behind the wheel of my car, the asylum looming in the distance, its towers black against the night sky. The gate stood open as though it had been waiting for me all along. Inside, the silence swallowed me whole. My flashlight flickered, then died, but I didn't need it. The halls glowed faintly, lit by some unseen source, shadows writhing on the walls like living things. The whispers grew louder, layering over one another until it was impossible to tell how many voices there were. Hundreds? Thousands? They led me back to Ward F, the violent ward. The place where I had first heard the whisper. They never left. And they were right. I saw them. Dozens of figures lining the hallway. Patients in torn gowns, their faces pale and sunken, their eyes empty black pits. Some dragged chains. Some clutched at their heads. They didn't walk. They twitched, shuddered, as if pulled forward by invisible strings. They surrounded me, their whispers rising into a deafening chorus. In the center of them all stood the tall figure, the man with no face. His head bent, his presence filling the air like poison. Slowly, he raised one hand and pointed at me. The voices fell silent. I felt my body move against my will, my feet dragging across the floor, closer and closer to him. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I couldn't stop. His hollow gaze burned into me, empty but consuming. And then, without warning, I understood. He wasn't just one spirit. He was all of them. Every tortured soul, every forgotten patient, every scream that had ever echoed in these halls, they had fused into him. He was the asylum. The last thing I remember is his hand pressing against my chest, ice cold, sinking through skin and bone like smoke. Darkness swallowed me and I felt myself unravel. They say people still hear footsteps in the asylum, still hear whispers in the walls. But if you ever visit and you feel someone standing just behind you, watching from the shadows, don't turn around. Because maybe it won't be one of them. Maybe it'll be me.